Just look at it. This is the face of pure horror. And this is Pantheon mythology, where today we'll be asking and answering the question, why are dolls so creepy? If you too want to be a creepy doll, then check out Pantheon Apparel, our clothing brand inspired by myths from around the world. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot, link in the description. Everyone got some spare underwear? Right, let's go. Dolls have long existed at the edge of innocence and fear. While we often associate them with childhood play, their origins in history are far darker. Across cultures, dolls were crafted not only as toys but as ritualistic symbols and, some believe, conduits for the supernatural. It's this shadowy connection to both comfort and terror that keeps them so hauntingly unforgettable. First on the horror checklist is the uncanny valley. Dolls, especially those designed to resemble humans, often inhabit this eerie psychological chasm. The uncanny valley, a term introduced by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in 1970, describes the unsettling sensation we feel when something looks almost human but not quite right. A doll's glassy eyes, stiff smile, and lifeless stillness tug at the edges of our subconscious, creating a profound discomfort. It's as if they're trying to be one of us, but something you can't quite name, is off. This response stems from our brain's natural ability to detect human faces and emotions. We instinctively recognize life in the smallest details, a warm gaze, subtle movements, or even imperfections. When a doll mimics these traits but falls short, it creates a conflict in our perception. Is it alive, or is it just pretending to be? That tension leaves us on edge, and in some cases, outright frightened. But it's not just human-like dolls that unnerve us. Even dolls without realistic features like ragdolls, wooden carvings, or faceless figures can send chills down our spines. These figures may lack human detail, but their stillness, their silence, and the way they occupy space feel hauntingly unnatural. It's not about how much they resemble us. It's about the way they command attention, as if they hold the secrets we're better off not knowing. And perhaps that's the core of it. Dolls exist in the uncanny valley because they toy with our sense of reality. Whether they're lifelike or abstract, they seem to blur the lines between animate and inanimate. They provoke the question no one wants to ask. What if they're more alive than they appear? Annabelle, the lovely doll we saw at the start of this video, is no ordinary plaything. In the early 1970s, a nursing student named Donna received this Raggedy Ann doll as a birthday gift from her mother. Soon after, Donna and her roommate Angie noticed the doll changing positions and moving to different rooms on its own. They also found cryptic messages written on parchment paper, something neither of them owned. The final straw was when a friend, Lou, was attacked by an unseen force, leaving claw marks on his chest. Desperate, they contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators, who concluded that a demonic spirit was manipulating the doll to seek human possession. To prevent further harm, the Warrens took Annabelle and placed her in a glass case in their occult museum, where she resides to this day, a silent sentinel of malevolent intent. But Annabelle isn't alone in the pantheon of haunted dolls. Meet Robert, a 3-foot-tall figure dressed in a sailor suit who has been terrorizing Key West, Florida for over a century. In the early 1900s, a young boy named Robert Eugene Otto received the doll as a gift from his grandfather. Gene, as he was called, formed an unusual attachment to the doll, which he named after himself. Soon, strange occurrences plagued the household, objects moved on their own, and eerie giggles echoed through the halls. Gene often claimed Robert did it when mischief occurred. Neighbors reported seeing the doll move from window to window when the family was away. After Gene's death, Robert the doll was donated to the Fort East Martello Museum, where he remains on display. Visitors who disrespect him reportedly suffer misfortunes, leading many to send letters of apology, which surround his glass case. In fact, beyond Annabelle and Robert, the world harbours other dolls with chilling reputations. In Japan, there's a tale of Okiko, a doll whose hair is said to grow on its own, believed to be possessed by the spirit of a young girl. Then there's Mandy, a porcelain doll from Canada, known for causing disturbances and eerie sounds in the museum where she resides. Australia has its own haunted figure, Letter Me Out, a doll reportedly found beneath her house, with claims of it moving on its own and causing distress to those nearby. And then there's La Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls, a place as haunting as it is tragic. Hidden among the canals of Xochimilco near Mexico City, this eerie island is covered in thousands of decaying dolls hanging from trees or scattered across the ground. Legend says the island's caretaker, Don Julian Santana, discovered the body of a drowned girl in the canal. Shortly after, he found a doll floating nearby and hung it in a tree to appease her restless spirit. But it didn't end there. Believing the girl's spirit was still present, he spent decades collecting and hanging dolls, each more unsettling than the last. Visitors today report feeling watched by the doll's vacant stares, hearing faint whispers, and even catching glimpses of movement in their decaying forms. Throughout history, dolls have carried more meaning than mere childhood playthings. In many cultures, they were crafted as tools for rituals and symbols for profound spiritual significance. Far from their innocent modern counterparts, these ancient dolls often served as intermediaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. In ancient Egypt, dolls were included in funerary rites, thought to accompany the deceased into the afterlife as representations of servants or family members. These figures were not toys but sacred objects meant to ensure the soul's comfort and continuity beyond death. Similarly, in some African and Native American traditions, dolls functioned as spirit vessels, housing protective energies or ancestral spirits to guide and guard their communities. This belief in dolls as conduits for the spiritual extended to their use in rituals. In European witchcraft, puppets, rudimentary effigies, were created to symbolize individuals, often with hair or personal items attached. These dolls became tools for influence, whether for healing, protection, or darker purposes like curses. Similarly, in voodoo, the famous dolls were used in practices of sympathetic magic, not inherently evil, but shaped by the intent of their creator. Across the globe, dolls have also been used as guardians. In Japan, Hina dolls were traditionally displayed to protect against misfortune, while other dolls were crafted to absorb spiritual harm. Yet when these objects were believed to be corrupted or turned malicious, they became sources of dread. Tales of spirit-possessed dolls and cursed effigies highlight how something so seemingly innocent could hold darker, more mysterious powers. Dolls are more than childhood companions. They are trusted protectors of innocence, symbols of comfort in a world full of unknowns. But when that trust is shattered, when a doll becomes a source of fear instead of solace, it creates a terror that feels deeply personal. This transformation is why dolls hold such a powerful place in horror. They take the familiar and twist it into something terrifying, turning symbols of safety into quiet reminders of danger. A doll's cheerful face can feel mocking. Its silence, once reassuring, becomes suffocating. And its stillness, almost watching, reminds us how easily comfort can turn into dread. Across cultures, dolls were crafted to guard against harm or comfort children in the dark. Yet the very traits that made them reassuring, those smiling faces, those ever-watchful eyes, are what make them so unnerving when their roles are reversed. When these protectors become the source of nightmares, they force us to question what we can really trust. And perhaps that's why dolls remain so terrifying. They are small, silent, and still, but their presence lingers for far longer than it should. They haunt the edges of our minds, their unblinking eyes daring us to look away. In the end, dolls don't need to move to scare us. The fear they evoke is already alive and thriving. Human instinct compels us to see life in the lifeless. Anthropomorphism, the act of attributing human traits to objects, is a quirk of the mind, a way we make sense of the world. It's why we see faces in patterns, talk to plants, or imagine a doll as a comforting companion. But this same instinct can take a darker turn, especially when it comes to something as human-like as a doll. A glassy gaze, meant to appear endearing, can feel piercing when our minds project life behind it. A painted smile becomes a knowing grin, and the silence of a doll feels calculated, as though it's quietly observing. The line between object and observer blurs, creating a tension that lingers in the mind. This fear deepens when dolls seem to defy their stillness. A doll found in a different position than you left it, its head slightly tilted or its limbs askew, immediately sparks a primal unease. We rationalize these moments. Perhaps someone moved it, or we simply forgot where we placed it. But a sliver of doubt remains. What if it moved itself? Folklore and fiction have long capitalized on this fear. Tales of dolls coming to life are not new. In ancient traditions, dolls were sometimes seen as vessels for spirits, guardians that could act on behalf of those they protected. But when their purpose was corrupted, they became agents of harm instead. Modern stories like Child's Play and Annabelle echo this unease, taking anthropomorphism to its most horrifying extreme. The idea that a doll could not only come alive, but act with intent. Anthropomorphism doesn't just bring objects to life in our imaginations, it makes us question where life begins and ends. The fear of animation, the possibility of movement where there should be none, plays on our deepest anxieties about control. There's something uniquely disturbing about the idea that an object, so still and silent, might not be as empty as it appears. A doll, crafted to be lifeless, can suddenly seem like a host, its blank expression hinting at something far darker within. This fear doesn't stem from the object itself, but from what might inhabit it. Unseen, intangible, yet undeniably present. It's the ultimate betrayal of trust, turning the comforting into something threatening, the familiar into the alien. Throughout history, many cultures have shared the belief that objects can harbor spirits or malevolent energies. In Japan, the concept of tsukumogami suggests that items, including dolls, can develop spirits after long years of use, potentially becoming mischievous or even vengeful. In the Philippines, stories of cursed dolls, crafted by witches, warns of toys that turn on their owners, driven by the ill will embedded within them. Similarly, European folklore tells of effigies imbued with dark magic to torment those they represent. These tales all suggest that the lifeless can become anything but. On a psychological level, this fear taps into something deeply personal. Possessions often carry emotional weight, pieces of ourselves bound up in objects we trust. When those items are thought to be corrupted, it's not just the object at stake, but our sense of safety and control. Imagine the creeping dread of seeing a childhood doll, its once familiar presence now heavy with something unexplainable. It's not just the doll that terrifies, it's the question of what else might be lurking within it, hidden behind its stillness. Possession doesn't always need to be dramatic to unsettle us. Sometimes it's the quiet, lingering possibility that the things we hold dear are no longer ours. The thought that an object could house something malevolent feels intimate, invasive, and deeply wrong. A fear that, once awakened, is impossible to forget. Throughout history, dolls have been tied to more than just childhood play, often woven into rituals of mourning and the passage of spirits into the afterlife. In many cultures, these figures became symbolic representations of grief, carrying the spirits of lost loved ones or guiding the dead on their journey. One of the most poignant examples is from the Victorian era, where mourning dolls were made to memorialize lost children. These figures were not just toys, but symbols of loss, often crafted with hair, clothing, or personal items of the deceased. Families display these dolls in homes as a way to keep the memory of their child alive, offering a source of comfort during sorrowful times. With their lifelike details and blank expressions, these dolls became an unsettling reflection of a child's life cut short. In other cultures, dolls played more active roles in spiritual practices. Dolls were often used in graves or as spiritual intermediaries, believed to carry the soul of the deceased or guide them to the afterlife. In these rituals, dolls served not just as symbols, but as active vessels for spirits, believed to offer protection or help navigate the spiritual world. In this context, dolls become more than physical objects. They are extensions of the deceased's soul, serving a role far deeper than most ever realize. So why are dolls so creepy? It's because they blur the lines between the living and the inanimate, turning something meant to comfort into an object that inspires fear. From the eerie stillness that makes us question their true nature, to the sinister history of dolls as vessels for spirits and symbols of grief, they have always been a gateway to the unknown. Whether it's their unsettling stillness, the fear that they could move when we're not looking, or the belief that they might house something far darker, dolls hold a place in our nightmares.